Hello, everybody. This is Economics Junkie. I would like to talk about Rand Paul's balanced budget proposal. This is from Zero Hedge. On Wednesday afternoon, one day after reintroducing his Federal Reserve Transparency Act, Senator Rand Paul took to the Senate floor to slam his fellow Republicans for the $9.7 trillion of debt that a newly introduced budget resolution will tack on to the country's already out-of-control debt. Republicans won the White House. Republicans control the Senate. Republicans control the House. And what will the first order of business be for the new Republican majority? Rand Paul asked. To pass a budget that never balances, the Kentucky senator answered his own question. To pass a budget that will add $9.7 trillion of new debt in 10 years. Actually, $9.7 trillion of new debt in 10 years wouldn't even be all that unusual if you think about it. Under Obama, I think the debt went up from something like 8 to 20 trillion. Under Bush, if I'm not mistaken, something like 4 to 8 trillion. So I want to explain some of the problems with making balanced budgets your primary policy goal, or any policy goal for that matter. And I have to provide some background on what is behind this thinking. Most Libertarians and also Republicans in Congress, whenever they like to exert political pressure in particular, they rely on the notion that the government is like a household, right? It's a very easy thing to explain to people. You have to balance your budget, so why should the government not balance its budget? Why should the government run wild and spend however much they want? Which, of course, is not what anyone is proposing, but in particular, the idea of adding new government debt or running deficits is revolting to a lot of libertarians and Republicans. So this relies on the so-called barter theory of money, which suggests that money is a medium of exchange that arose in free markets amongst bartering individuals who used competing media of exchange, and in an efficient market process of selection, the best media of exchange, gold and silver, emerged as money broadly. And people started using it in private exchange, and then the mean government came in and started taking people's money and started allocating some of that spending for its own purposes. So from this perspective, you could argue the government is just another user of the money and thus should balance their budget, not go run deficits, go in debt, as people reference it most of the time. So the problem with this barter theory, where money arose out of a barter process, the problem with this theory is that there's no empirical evidence for it. And I'm going to read some quotes from an article in The Atlantic, which discusses the anthropological research that has been done in the field of monetary theory and monetary economics, fiscal policy, and things like that. I'm just pulling it up right here. Okay. And I will provide links to all my sources. The article says that various anthropologists have pointed out that this barter economy has never been witnessed, as researchers have traveled to undeveloped parts of the globe. No example of a barter economy, pure and simple, has ever been described, let alone the emergence of from it of money, wrote the Cambridge anthropology professor Caroline Humphrey in a 1985 paper. All available ethnography suggests that there never has been such a thing. When barter has appeared, it wasn't as part of a purely barter economy, and money didn't emerge from it. Rather, it emerged from money. After Rome fell, for instance, Europeans used barter as a substitute for the Roman currency people had gotten used to. In most cases we know about, barter takes place between people who are familiar with the use of money, but for one reason or another don't have a lot of it around, explains David Graeber, an anthropology professor at the London School of Economics. No academics I talked to were aware of any evidence that barter was actually the precursor to money, despite the story's prevalence in economics textbooks and the public's consciousness. Some argue that no one ever believed barter was real to begin with. The idea was a crude model used to simplify the context of modern economic systems, not a real theory about past ones. I don't think anybody believes that was ever a historical situation. Even the economists writing the textbook. Michael Beggs, a lecturer in political economy at the University of Sydney, told me. It's more of a thought experiment. So it's a thought experiment, okay? That's Stefan Molyneux pointed out to me when I talked to him about this. That's usually what people say when they've been proven wrong, and they don't like to say that they were wrong. They just say it's a thought experiment. So there's no evidence that money arose out of barter. There's not even real evidence for barter, okay? But in particular, there's little to no evidence that money arose out of it. So we have to go back to history to understand how money and deficits and budgets work and have worked for the past, for the past millennia that we're aware of. The theory that seems to have most of the evidence behind it is the so-called state theory of money, which suggests that money was introduced by states who wanted to tax people. So to give you a simplistic example, imagine I have a tribe. My name is Nima, okay, in case you didn't know. Hi, I'm Nima. My tribe is the Nima tribe because I'm a narcissist, and I want to introduce a new currency called Nima bucks, because why not make it all about me, right? So let's say I have a tribe of 100 members. We're all living hand to mouth in a subsistence economy, and I would like to make our economy into a monetary economy. So what I do is I declare a tax of 1 Nima buck per week on all of the tribe's members. And the next thing that, of course, the tribal members will be asking me is, okay, how are we going to pay this tax? We need Nima bucks to pay you Nima bucks. Because up to this point, there are no Nima bucks. I am the one introducing them, right? I'm the one minting the coins or creating the magic colored sticks or whatever medium I use to introduce money into the economy. So the next thing I have to do is I have to hire people into the so-called public sector. I have to make them build roads or be my medicine man or my rain dancers or whatever it is that tribal elites do in a tribal economy that is on the verge to becoming a monetary economy. And so I have to hire people to, let's say, I make them build some bridges across rivers and stuff like that. I pay them Nima bucks, and now they can pay me the tax by the end of every week of 1 Nima buck per person. So I make about 100 Nima bucks per week because I have 100 tribal members. So the important thing here is that the moment I spend money into existence, I have deficit spent money into existence. This is how governments spend money. They don't collect money by taxation first. They spend money first, and then they take it out of the economy later on through taxation. And the tax is not a means of fiscal policy, as you can probably tell. It's not a way for the government to raise funds. It's a way for the government to give the money that it has introduced into the economy value. Because if there was no tax, then there would be nobody would have any demand for it. Nobody would need to hold it. But if I say you owe me 1 NEMA buck per week now suddenly people need NEMA bucks. Now suddenly everyone in my economy needs NEMA bucks. And so let's say I collect 100 NEMA bucks by the end of the week, but I spend 400 NEMA bucks in the first week. That means there's now 300 NEMA bucks left among the individuals in the economy to use as a medium of exchange and to leverage and to perform transactions on top of. So the private economy succeeds, or the private economy follows from me hiring people into the public sector, spending NEMA bucks, and in particular spending NEMA bucks that now have value. So that's how fiat money systems have functioned for millennia, as far as we're aware. There's a lot of anthropological evidence for it. Economists have spent embarrassingly little time on figuring this stuff out, actually. But we have some peer-reviewed anthropology papers and research that we can reference. So you can see that everybody needs NEMA bucks in the economy that I've created now. And if I didn't spend those NEMA bucks, or if I only spent 200 NEMA bucks, and then taxed all those NEMA bucks away at the end of, only 100 NEMA bucks, okay? Let's say I introduce 100 NEMA bucks and tax all the 100 NEMA bucks away at the end of the week. Because I have 100 tribal members, everyone owes me 1 NEMA buck per week. I only spend 100 NEMA bucks on public work projects or whatever. Now, everyone is completely broke at the end of this week, right? I have not allowed anyone to accumulate any private sector saving, and that's the result of my balanced budget. If I was running balanced budgets from the very beginning, then the entire scenario would actually be nonsensical, because I would have to declare the tax. I would have to impose the tax of 1 NEMA buck per week, and then just sit back and not do anything for the rest of the week, and then start taking people's things instead of NEMA bucks, because they don't have any NEMA bucks. So the consistent application of balanced budgets, or even budget surpluses, actually results in the private sector being in debt to the public sector and having to relinquish ownership of private property in order to be able to pay the tax. So that's what a consistent application of balanced budgets or budget surpluses will lead you to. If Rand Paul had his way consistently, in other words, if we were consistently generating balanced budgets, or maybe even budget surpluses, the outcome would be that all of you would ultimately be in debt to the federal government and constantly scrambling for money to pay the tax, to have some savings left. Needless to say, the demand in the private sector would be hugely suppressed, because I'm not even allowing the private sector to develop the savings it needs to begin with. And the outcome would be an economic recession, or maybe even a complete depression. And when I say depression, I want to give some evidence for this. So let's say we take the more extreme case. We don't just run balanced budgets, but we run budget surpluses, because surpluses are good, right? Because households have to run budget surpluses. So why doesn't the government also run budget surpluses? Well, I just explained the nonsensical nature of that mechanism in theory to you. Now let me give you some historical evidence. There's a blog post in which economics professor Randall Wray presents an interesting historical link between budget surpluses and ensuing depressions in the United States. In particular, 6 out of 7 federal government budget surpluses were followed by a depression. And now I'm going to quote from his article. Since 1776, there have been exactly 7 periods of substantial budget surpluses and significant reduction of debt. From 1817 to 1821, the national debt fell by 29%, and we had a depression in 1819. From 1823 to 1836, the debt was eliminated thanks to our libertarian hero Andrew Jackson eliminating the federal debt entirely, which is apparently a good thing, right? So from 1823 through 1836, he eliminated the entire national debt, ran budget surpluses consistently, and we had a depression in 1837. Then we had surpluses from 1852 to 1857. The debt fell by 59%, and we had a depression in 1857. By the way, depression is generally defined by a sustained, ongoing slump in economic activity, GDP, employment. There are some markers such as 10% or more unemployment, for example, but there's no real official definition. But just, if we look at prolonged periods of unemployment and suffering, it's probably an easy way to put it. So then from 1867 to 1873, there was a budget surplus, debt was reduced by 27%, and we had a depression in 1873. And we had a period from 1880 to 1893 where the debt was cut by more than 50%. And we had a depression in 1893. And then, of course, we had a prudent budget surpluses from 1920 to 1930, and we had the Great Depression starting in 1929. And that's what Randall Ray writes about. And then I can also cite more recent examples. The budget surplus at the end of the Clinton years precipitated the recession and the crash of 2001, and arguably even by extension the Great Depression of 2008 through 2009. So that's what historical empirical evidence shows us budget surpluses lead to. So you can see that there seems to be something off with looking at government budgets as though they were household budgets. And I hope that I've given you some food for thought, and I will provide links to all my sources below this clip, and you let me know what you think. Thank you very much.